Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday to you. We are going to be having a webinar, another fantastically informative and gorgeous webinar. This one is another one on Photoshop. And we were having a lot of fun in noticing that the last Photoshop webinar that Paul did was one of our highest attended webinars. So of course we roped him into doing another one, and he's thrilled. He's absolutely thrilled about that. If this is your first time using our little webinar here through this Zoom interface, note that at the very top of your screen you have those view options. I always have to click on that and say exit full screen. Otherwise it just takes over my whole monitor and drives me a little crazy. Still plenty of room to take that off of full screen, and then you can actually move it around a little so it doesn't take over your whole computer. Just throwing that out there. And of course you'll notice that you have a Q&A box. Please feel free to punch in questions. Got both myself and Amanda will be answering questions and getting those routed over to Paul. So we're definitely gonna encourage your feedback and lots of questions. I'm sure we'll cover a lot of great things. Paul has some fantastic stuff lined up. So I'm gonna stop talking and let Paul take it away.
Alrighty, thank you, Jer. And hello, everybody. Welcome to another exciting and informative webinar on Photoshop techniques in the realm of rendering landscape plans. If you remember in the last webinar that I did, I took a fully rendered plan from Land Effects and demonstrated how to move it into Photoshop for some quick graphical enhancements. And those enhancements were so quick that we were able to go through it, the entire process, within an hour. This time around, I'm going to go a little further down that road using Photoshop and show you some more techniques that I've picked up over the years as far as rendering plans in Photoshop. Now, these are going to be a little more time consuming, so I'm just going to show you bits and pieces to get you on the right path to creating some pretty striking plan renders. So here's the outline for today. To start things off, we've had a lot of requests for more of a hand-rendered look to our rendered graphics. And while our rendering capabilities are pretty good and continue to get better as we develop them more, we are still somewhat limited to the CAD platform. And because of this, producing graphics that have imperfections like those that are drawn by hand, it's just not going to happen. And so I know that a lot of our users are tied to this style of graphics, and personally, I think that there's a lot of character in hand-rendered plans. I'm going to demonstrate how to take some hand-drawn elements and digitize them so that they can be efficiently used in Photoshop. I will then take these optimized elements and save them into a library of content. And the idea behind this is that once we have a bunch of different hand-drawn symbols and elements created, we will want to store them in a graphics library. And once a library is made, creating a hand-rendered plan will take a lot less time than it would if you were actually doing the entire plan by hand. Plus, you'll have the benefit of more control over your graphics. And since accidents can happen, you can basically avoid those by using Photoshop. And once you submit a plan, you can go back and make edits a lot easier to that plan without having to redraw the entire thing. After that, I will go through implementing some of these graphic elements into a plan and show you the techniques that I use to get them from hand-drawn to plan. And then finally, I will use a lot of those same techniques, and instead of using hand-drawn graphics, I will use photos and textures that I have and put them into a plan so you get a completely different style of a render plan, but it will parallel sort of the same techniques from before. So moving on. So here I did a quick mock-up of sort of what I'll be demonstrating. I threw this together rather quickly, so it may not be the most striking image, but it's going to be good enough for these purposes. And here I just wanted to point out that we have a plan, and on the plan there's different layers of content. You can see that there are various symbols that repeat themselves and textures. And so recognizing these different layers to the landscape drawing is going to be important in guiding you on what content you create for your library, which will you then use for rendering your plan. Okay, so to begin, I made a series of different symbols to be copied and pasted within the plan. Here are some examples of the ones that I made. These are fully digitized and ready to be used in Photoshop, but how did they get there from being hand-drawn? I will quickly demonstrate. Initially, what I did is I took some outlines that I drew. I didn't want to be restricted to drawing the entire symbol itself. Instead, I wanted to draw a few different pieces of symbols so that when they are brought into Photoshop, they can be put together in a number of different ways so you can mix and match. So here you can see I have some outlines that I drew by hand. I also did some interior work, and then I did some different color variations. And so by doing this, like I said, you can basically grab any one of these outlines and put in either one or a couple of these different interior line works, as well as some color, and you can mix and match to have a really wide variety of different symbols. Additionally, the landscape plan is not solely made up of landscape symbols. You'll also have typically have a lot of areas that you want to cover. And if you want to give those a hand-rendered look as well, I will show you how to take what I've done here, which is just some basic areas that are hand-drawn, and then apply them to a plan. So let's go through making one of these tree symbols in Photoshop. So as you can see here, I have scanned in a piece of paper that I drew some outlines of trees on. Some of these can be used for shrubs, but it's not really ready to be used efficiently yet. So I've also scanned in those other elements that I showed earlier. So what I want to do is I want to take these elements and put them together in a separate drawing and then save them so that they can be easily dragged and dropped into Photoshop. To do this, I will create a new document. And I've already set this up through a test run yesterday, but I typically want to use a resolution that's higher than anything that I will actually be needing for rendering a plan. 4 inches by 4 inches at 300 dpi is plenty, I think, for any blow up or any scale of plan that we would be working with. So that's what I like to use, and I'll just call this tree symbol. Okay, so we have the background for how we would be constructing our symbol. Okay, so starting here with our raw scans, and I just brought them into Photoshop, I want to basically take these outlines. You can see that they are somewhat gray. They're not perfectly black. And then there's some, looks like some pencil marking still in there and a whole lot of white pixels. What I want to do, the goal here is to get rid of all of the white pixels on this image so that you have empty space and just the line work for those tree symbols. And so how I do that is I'll change the color of the background to make it easier to read by just filling in the background with a different color so that you can tell if there's still any white pixels left or anything that you don't want in the drawing. Next, what I'll do is I will select the layer for the outlines, head up to image adjustments, and adjust the tone levels so that the near black grays actually come in as close to as black as possible. So I'll just drag this black slider over to about here. And then I'll drag the white over a little as well. And you can see here where there's a little bit of pencil marking still on the page. It just changes that to white. So now we have some pretty clean, high contrast symbols. We'll hit OK. And now using the Magic Wand tool, we will select all of these white pixels. Make sure to turn off contiguous so that it selects every white pixel in the layer. That looks good. And I'll just hit the delete key and then Command or Control D to deselect. And because I have that blue background, I can clearly see that there are no more white pixels or anything that is still in that layer that I don't want to be in there. I think it looks pretty good for an outline. So now I will do the same process to these other scans that I have. Just adjust the levels just a tad. Okay, hit W for Magic Wand tool. There we are. And there's still some gray stuff over here, so I'll try to select that as well. And I'll hit delete, Control D. It looks pretty clean. And finally, we'll do that for color. Oh, but we want to make sure we have the right layer selected. All right, so we have now our 3 different layers to a symbol somewhat ready to be put together. So let's grab one of these outlines. I'm going to use the rectangular Marquee tool, and I like this outline. So I'm going to put a selection around it, make sure that that layer is selected, and I'm going to hit Command C or Control C to copy. Then I'll go to my tree symbol drawing, and I will hit Command or Control V to paste it. And then Command or Control T to transform. And that way I can grab these little corner grips and expand the symbol so that it fills up most of that window. Holding down the Shift key allows you to drag the transform window at an equal ratio of width to height. So I want to hold that down as I drag it. And then now we'll go back and grab an interior design. Let's grab this one. Actually, no, it's a deciduous tree. Let's do this. Okay, I want to make sure that the interior elements layer is selected, and then I can do the same thing with Control C and Control V. Notice that it puts it on a separate layer, which is really convenient because now I can just hit Control T, drag while holding the Shift button until it looks just right. A little bit of advice. When making symbols like this, if they're a circle, it'd be a good idea to put an indicator of where the exact center is, so that when you are placing these interior lines or colors, you know exactly where that is. That looks pretty close though. And so now we'll do the same for a color. Let's just do this one. Control C, Control V. And we'll want to drag this color layer behind the other elements in the layers manager. And then adjust the size. And then when you are moving elements around, if you want to fine tune them, use the arrow keys on the keyboard rather than dragging and dropping. Okay, so there we have a pretty basic colored tree symbol. And what I want to do, since it's a tree symbol and it has a canopy, and a lot of times you want to see what's under that canopy, this color layer, I'm actually going to drop the opacity to about 60 to 75%, so that things underneath will be able to show up still. You can also drop the opacity of the interior line work if you want, so it looks more like it was drawn with pencil. That's really going to be up to you. So I think that looks pretty good. Now what we want to do is save this as one single file, and we want to save it so that there are no white pixels in there, so that when you bring it in, you don't have to go through the process of removing the white pixels again. So what I'll do is I'll just delete the background layer, and you'll see that the translucency of the color remains and has a nice opaqueness to it. So I will then save it. I'm just going to do Control-Shift-S to save as. And I've already set up this library, but what it is, I created a folder for hand-drawn elements, one for trees, and then here I have my tree symbol library. And so what I want to do is I want to save it as a PNG image. This way it retains those empty pixels. And let's stay with the same naming convention that I've already set up, which is tree-DEC for deciduous, and then a number. Hit save. The default settings are fine. Okay. So now, if we go back, we can basically drag this into a drawing, and you'll see that the outline looks good. It's nice, dark, and yet the interior elements are translucent enough to be able to show what's going on underneath that tree canopy. Okay. Now, this process will apply to every symbol that you'll make, whether it's any kind of site amenities or shrub symbols. Typically with shrubs, what I'll do is I will not go through the process of making a colored background that is translucent. I will, in fact, just make it a solid color, because typically you're not going to have shrubs sitting on top of things that you want to show things under. And if you do have that, you can adjust the opacity of that layer when you're actually putting it into the plan. So here, using the same process as we did with the tree, I made quite a few different shrub symbols. And so let's move on to these marker texture areas. These will basically go over and take the place of hardscapes, ground covers, roofing, decking, anything like that. And these are simple ones. You can obviously go and make these areas with colored pencil. Watercolor has a really cool effect. You can mix and match different mediums. With these, I was just using Prismacolor markers, so that's what we'll be working with. And so we'll basically set up the same sort of drawing to be placing these different textures into. So what I'll do is I just scan this in. Once you scan it in, if the paper doesn't look quite right, once again, go to your levels and adjust these so that the color value and the tone is where you want it to be. And then we'll just use our Marquee Tool again, and we'll grab one of these areas. I'm paying close attention to not go outside, because I want the entire marker area in this drawing to not have anything but the marker in it. So what I did is I just selected it, made sure to stay within the boundary, did the Command C or Control C again, and now I'm pasting it into here. Control T once again, and just stretch it out so it fills the entire thing up. And then save it. Go to libraries, my hand-drawn libraries, textures, materials. And the way that I've set these materials up is I wrote the medium that I drew with. In this case, it's marker, a dash, something that indicates what it is. So this one is kind of has like a stone color to it. So when I actually saved this one, it was marker dash stone. Obviously, these can be used for many, many different entities, but this is just sort of an indicator so that when you're looking through a bunch of different textures or materials, you know what you're clicking on. So then you'd save that, and that will go into your library, and repeat that process with all of your different materials or textures that you'll be using within your plan. And so from here, we have created a bit of a library of different symbols and different textures and things to be used. And we're going to be putting them into a plan next. But before we go there, I wanted to stop and see if anybody had any questions so far on what I've gone through.
So far, no questions on your process, but we did have a obvious question from Deborah, who wants to know if you're willing to sell your library of files. So,
of hand symbols?
Yeah. So I think that'd be great to put together everything you have here as a free download. But if you wanted to make a little extra scratch, it sounds like Deborah's willing to pay you for it.
Well, Deborah, if you want to email me, it's paul@landeffects.com. I could do that for you. But yeah, if that's it, then I guess I'll just move on to actually putting these into the landscape. All right. So moving on, I can close these. Okay, so after the last webinar that I did, you should know that I had a workflow for getting my CAD elements into Photoshop so that they can be easily utilized when rendering. And so we were starting at that step. Basically what I did is I used group filters to separate different layers of the landscape, like trees, shrubs, ground plane stuff, and just basic base areas as different PDFs, and then I brought them into Photoshop and I merged them together into one Photoshop document. And so it's going to be important to do this as well, since I'm basically going to be putting all new color elements into it. I left it as simple as possible so that it's easy to work with and there's no extraneous elements getting in the way of what we're trying to do. So I think the most important part of this is actually the base layer. And the reason this is so important is because we'll be using that Magic Wand tool again and making selections of each area here, and each area of different material or what you want to show off. And you want to have really, really clean selections for it to look pretty good. And so what I did is I took the various textures or hatch patterns and put them on a separate layer than the base so that those selections can be made easily. And then also separated, trees and those other elements. So first things first, I'm going to show how to put in our new symbol into this drawing. Basically what I'll do is I'll hide some stuff so it's easier to work with and just leave the trees on in the base. And another thing I did is I put all of those separate PDF layers into their own respected layer folder. This is going to make it easy to keep things organized as we work forward because I'm guilty of this as well. It's frustrating to get really far into a drawing without proper layer organization and just try to find, a certain layer, and you have to go digging through your manager or try to, right click on it, and it gets pretty complicated. So from the get-go, we're going to practice good organization of our layers. So starting with trees, I'm going to go to my library, and I'll actually just use the tree that we just made, and I will just drag and drop it into Photoshop. And from here, it's just matching it up with the tree symbol that's already there, using these grip points and holding down the Shift key to shrink them down uniformly and matching them up. Once that looks good, and I'm going to have my shadows go at a 45-degree angle to the lower left corner, so that's fine. But if you need to adjust, you can rotate as well. So I'm just going to leave it like that. I'll hit Enter to set it. And right off the bat, I'm going to do a couple things with this. I'm going to rasterize the layer. This will be important later when I merge all these layers together. And I'm also going to name it. And I have a system for that where I have a plant schedule in here so that I can easily reference what plants are what. And I'll just call this Q agrifolia. Okay, now we have one symbol in there. We need to basically copy and paste it around. An easy way to do this that I found is select the layer, and you can either drag it to this icon here and copy it, or simply hit Control or Command and J, and that makes a copy of the layer. And then I hit the V key for this tool here, and I'll move it right over. Do some fine adjustments with the arrow key. Repeat with Command J, move it over, and adjust. Okay, and that was easy. They're placed in there, and I'll want to indicate that this new color symbol is this tree. So I will do one more, but I will shrink it down and just place it right there. Okay. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different layers for Quercus agrifolia, and yet you can keep it that way if that's going to be easier for you. What I like to do is just once I have all of my plants placed, I will select them all and hit Command E or Control E to merge all those layers together, so that I have just one clean, simple layer for all of those tree symbols. And then from there, we can use the same technique to make these other trees. But because we are kind of short on time, I'm just going to leave that up to you. And before we move on, I actually want to show you how to make a quick shadow for these, because usually with a lot of these elements that I'll be going through, I can do a drop shadow. But since trees are a special case and they have, hidden, like no pixels and, some transparencies in them, if you do a shadow, it could look funny. So instead, what I'll do is I will create a new layer, call it Tree Shadows. And I'll just take my brush tool. I'll set it to a hard brush setting and to the color black. And I will basically size the brush so that it fits the diameter of the tree in the drawing. And I will just draw a black circle right where that shadow should be. like that. And then I'll take my eraser tool, which is this guy, and I will try to match that same diameter, but I'll drag it up and erase where it overlaps the tree. And so that's just a very, very simple solution for a shadow on these trees. And you can adjust the opacity to your liking. And then put it underneath the tree symbols. Okay. So let's move on and place a couple of shrubs in the drawing because it'll be a slightly different process. So here I have my shrub library, and I just want to place a couple of these. How about some of these funky blue? Oh, maybe that one didn't save all the way. Let's try one of these burgundy plants. Okay. Shrubs in there. I'm going to place that shrub into my shrubs layer. And I'll just turn off my trees while I'm working with shrubs and turn on the shrub layer. And let's say that the burgundy plant is these proteas. So once again, like I did with the tree, I will rasterize the layer. I will name it p dot okay, and Control T to transform and shrink it down so that it fits. Right on top of where it's supposed to go. Enter to set it, and then set the opacity at 100%. And then once again, Command J, V, set. Command J, V, and set. Okay, and finally, I will put it into my schedule. Okay, and so that was the basic process for the tree, but with the shadows on these, since they are solid entities, I will just simply do a drop shadow. And once we have a bunch of different shrubs in this shrub layer folder, it's pretty easy to just add a effect to the folder itself so that it applies to every layer within. And so we'll just click on this button and then click on drop shadow. And we'll just give it a little bit of a shadow to make it pop off the page. And so that's one, that's a very quick solution to giving shadows to all of your shrubs at one time. All right, so now we've gone through making a tree symbol, how to make the shrub symbols, and how to bring them in. From this point, you'll want to continue doing that until the entire plant palette is filled out. But let's move on to placing some of these areas. So first I'm going to go to my textures or materials, And what I want to show off is a couple different examples here. I want to do the water for the pool. So let's do that first. I'll place it in my textures folder. In textures is where I also have my hatch patterns. So just turn that off for now. And since we're not going to be altering this too much, you don't have to rasterize it. You can just transform it the way it is. This is a beautiful thing about having these rectangular objects, is that you can basically just drag one corner into the area and just form it perfectly within. And if you drop the opacity, you can see exactly where the lines are. And I don't think it could be easier to put that in. So with simple shapes like that, that's going to be a great way to do it. Now let's put a texture in this like brick pool area, or it could be concrete or whatever you want it to be. This hardscape here. There's going to be kind of a funky shape here, stair inlet, and then also a cutout. So it's going to be a little bit of a different workflow for that. So I'll demonstrate that now. Let's use this one. Okay, so what we want to do is, in this situation, we want to place this texture so that it completely envelops the area that you're placing it into, because you're basically going to take that area and use it like a cookie cutter and cut it out of this. And so as long as it completely exceeds the boundaries of that area, you should be good to work with it. So I just stretched it out. And so now we will go to our base and use our Magic Wand tool and make sure that this contiguous option is selected, so that it only selects the white pixels, or I guess in this case, the lack of pixels within this area and nothing else. And then we'll go to our marker texture with that selection made and just do another copy and paste. So that now if we hide that, we have that area very cleanly cut out and ready to work with for this area. So this is not really the color that I want to use. So we can make some adjustments to that. I guess that's one thing I probably didn't mention earlier, but the actual color and like hue of the tree colors and shrub colors, and also these colors here, really don't matter that much, because once you're in Photoshop, it's very easy to shift the color. Opening up this adjustment here, hue saturation, you can very quickly adjust the color, how much chroma value it has, and also the light and darkness of it. So I'm just going to go with something almost grayish, something like that. Okay, so now we have these paving done here, and we have this hatches pattern over on top. If you want to change this to have more of a, or I guess less of a computerized or computer generated look to it, I can give you a little tip on that. So what I'll do is I'll create a new layer and I will fill it with white, not black. And I will then merge my hatches onto it. So now it is hatch pattern on top of white pixels. And the reason we do that is so that we can apply a filter to it. And these filters are fun to play with as long as you don't overuse them. But they can allow you to get a more of a hand-drawn or less of a CAD look to them. So let's go through a few of these. And see if we can't get something that looks a little more organic. This will work for now. But yeah, play around with these and sort of get the look that you're going for. So now we'll want to, basically now there's a lot of white in here, and to get rid of that, you just want to set this, let's do patterns, and we will set it to multiply. That way all of the white pixels within will basically disappear. And then we can drop the opacity. Okay. All right, so far we are on our way. Now I'll do one more. I'll just do this deck real quick using the same technique. This looks sort of wood-like. I'll actually adjust the settings so that it reads a little better as like a redwood or something. Okay. And I'll rasterize this layer. And then I will transform it so that you can see these marker lines. It sort of gives it definition. If I squeeze it together, it kind of conveys the idea that these are wood planks or lumber. So that's kind of a neat trick with this use of markers. If I had an area with more contrast within those marker strokes, this would look even better. But we'll just do the same thing that we did with the patio and encompass the deck area. Then we'll go to our base and we'll select the deck area and then copy and paste it out of there. And the reason I want to show off the deck is because this is a raised deck and I just want to add a drop shadow to it so that it comes off the page ever so slightly. Okay, so with these techniques that I just demonstrated, you should be able to go through and fill out the rest of a plan like this with your different tree and shrub symbols using these area graphics to cover your hardscapes and your ground covers and your planter boxes and just about everything that you would need on this plan. And so now we are 45 minutes in. We'll stop and take any questions.
Sure. Well, actually, we didn't get a lot of questions, but encourage people to bring a bunch in. We had a great comment from Richard about the use of the word chroma, and he said that takes him back to the days of Cal Poly and Sir Omar Farouk.
Yeah, that's where I got that word.
So I thought that was pretty good. But yeah, so I don't see any other open questions, if anybody has some. So if you want to keep going with something.
Yeah, okay. So at this point, I've demonstrated this. I will basically now just do a quick demonstration of these techniques and then a little bit more on grabbing some photorealistic looking graphics and putting them into it. So we don't need this anymore. And I have the same drawing set up here. And I will go to my library of photorealistic stuff. So these different textures and other graphics come from a library that I was given from TonyTextures.com. He provided me with thousands of really, really awesome textures and plant photos. And it's not just bird's eye stuff. There's a lot of profile views of different plants. And then any kind of material that you can think of, there's a texture for it. So thank you, Tony, for that. And also in our next newsletter, we'll have a shout out and a link for that. And if any of our users go to him, they'll get, I think it was like a 10% discount on that. But details will come out in the newsletter on Monday. So from the library that he gave me, I chose some different trees that I wanted to use and some different plants that I wanted to use in this, and also some textures. So I will now demonstrate putting some of these in. One cool thing about this is that they all come in that PNG form. They're already cut out and ready to go. So if I drag and drop my trees into Photoshop, I can basically just select which one I want to use and copy and paste it into the drawing and work with it from there. And using that same technique as with the hand-drawn elements, I will use it with a photo of a tree. And then just Command J and move. And once more for the schedule. Okay, so the reason I want to show this, not just because I wanted to repeat what we've already done, is the last webinar that I did, someone brought up making more of a realistic tree shadow on your plan. And so in this style, I think it's great to demonstrate one of these techniques, and that's basically taking a profile view of a tree and laying it down onto the ground plane and making it look like a shadow. So I will show that with these trees. I have a couple of different side view cutout tree images here. And I'll just place it in to the drawing and rotate it so that it follows the correct direction of the other shadows in the drawing. And I will size it so that the tree canopies match like that. And this layer will be called Tree Shadows. Okay, so we want to make sure that the tree shadows layer falls underneath the trees, and then we will change this to look like a shadow. How I like to do it is I have a layer that's on, and I just go up to the same hue saturation box. There's a couple different routes to do this, but I'll always just default go here, and I'll change this lightness slider all the way to black. And so already you see that you have what looks like a shadow. You can play around with this a bit. If you hit Control T and then right click on it, you can distort the image if you want to have more of a dramatic shadow or whatnot. So you have complete flexibility on how you shape this, but I'll just leave it the way it is and place it so that it sits under that tree like that. And like with most of the other symbols, I will just copy that layer with Command or Control J and place the shadows around. Okay, once the shadows are placed, I will merge the layers together and change the opacity down to about 50%, sometimes a little lighter. So now it looks like the sun rays are hitting the tree leaves and leaving a nice shadow on the ground. Another cool thing about Photoshop, say you wanted to show these trees in the fall time and they are not evergreen trees, and you live somewhere other than California where you see fall color, you can very easily go to this hue saturation box again and change these to have more of a fall leaf color look. Also, if you just have a tree with red leaves, that solves the problem of finding a tree with red leaves. Basically, you can take any color of plant or even texture and whatnot and adjust the colors accordingly in Photoshop so that you're not really limited to what the image looks like at its default state. Okay, now I want to just go over one last thing. I have this swimming pool here and I want to put this water texture in it. But I noticed that after I put this in, it looks very flat still, even though it is a photo of water, probably inside of a swimming pool. It just doesn't quite come off like it's inside of a pool. It kind of just sits there flat. So a solution that I came up with this is either burning the edges or creating some darkness on the edge to give like a shadow of the side of the pool. So what we can do is I like to, when I mess with something like this, after I have the layer ready to go, let's call it pool water. I like to make a copy of the layer so that if I make edits to it that I don't like, I can scratch it and I don't have to go through resizing that piece again. And then if I do like it, I can just toss the other one. So with this, what I'm going to try to do is burn the edges so that it looks like it has depth and shadow within the pool. So I'm going to go over here to my burn tool, and I'll keep the range on mid-tone, and I'll drop the size of the brush about 25% of the width or height of the pool. And holding the shift key down, I will click and drag across. Holding the shift key down is sort of like ortho mode in CAD. It allows you to draw perfect straight up and down or left and right lines. And so I will click outside of the object. Since there's no pixels up here, I'm not going to be burning anything. And then I'll hold shift and I'll move it down. And maybe do it one more time. And then something like that. So now it looks like there is some depth to it. There's maybe a little too much, so I can actually drop the opacity of that layer. And since the exact same layer without the burn is underneath, it'll just basically diminish that shadow that I put on. So yeah, now it looks like there's a pool there. And with that, we are about an hour in. If you have questions, please ask. I can quickly go through some other techniques. Otherwise, we'll just wrap it up.
Exactly. This has been fun. We've got some good questions. We had a couple of people that Amanda and I have been getting those answers to. But Tara has a good one, Paul. The name of that website where you downloaded those textures.
Mm-hmm. It was TonyTextures.com. And they actually, he mentioned that he has like a free package that you can go to his website and download. And then also, I was thinking we could provide a link when we actually post the webinar to that. So there's basically like a sampler, and then he has a couple of different packages that you can purchase.
Yes, yeah, this webinar will be posted to the website later today, and we'll get that link, and we'll get some of your files here. We'll see if we can get some of those as a little zip file to download. And by early next week, we'll also have the time-stamped summary of what is covered in the webinar. So that's a good time to go ahead and wait until Monday or Tuesday. So that's helpful when following along. And yeah, there's the end result there, which is pretty slick. But I got nothing more other than have a great weekend. You want to send everyone off, Paul?
Yeah, I didn't really prepare any closing statements, but obviously you can contact me if you have any more questions on this. We are here, and yeah, just have a great weekend.